When I was a teenager, I once attended a Christmas Eve Mass. It was one of those earlier Christmas Eve Masses, like at 4 or 3 or 2 or Tuesday, I don't know. And, the things we don't do here. And the homily, all the priest did was sing happy birthday to baby Jesus. And I was really judgy about that priest. And now, on my 4th Mass in 24 hours, soon to move into my 5th Mass in 24 hours by this evening, I am no longer judging that priest. But don't worry, good people of God, I will not cheat you this morning. Christmas is such a hard mystery for so many people to understand. I mean, it is distinctly Christian. The mystery of God made into a human person. Of God, of Jesus, who is fully God and fully man. So many of our earliest controversies in the church that led to councils and wars and all kinds of crazy things were really about trying to wrap our head around the mystery of the incarnation. And controversies, around Christmas still exist. For example, if you remember, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, there was a controversy about red cups, You know what I'm talking about? There was a certain coffee chain that used to show things like deer and snowflakes and, other scenes from the Bible on their cups, and they changed it to red, and this was a big controversy, Now the biggest controversy, besides happy holidays, that's just scandalous. I'm so offended when someone tells me happy holidays. You have no idea. Someone said happy holidays the other day. I said, how dare you? But then there's the really important controversies like whether or not Die Hard is a Christmas movie. It is. In case you're wondering, I decree it so. By the way, so is the new Spider-Man movie. No spoilers, go see it. Controversial things about Christmas, right? But whether Die Hard's a Christmas movie or not, there's one movie that I feel is a Christmas movie, and it doesn't ever even enter into this controversy of movies that are considered Christmas movies, and it's the movie that's based on C.S. Lewis's timeless classic, the first of his Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Are you all familiar with this one? If not, you should be. It's a really good, really great, really good story. Our 3 children, who are our heroes and heroines in the story, find themselves placed in a magical land called Narnia that's under the control of the White Witch. And when you get into Narnia, the defining characteristic of Narnia at the time is that it is always winter, opposite of Florida, right? They say in Narnia it's always winter, but never Christmas. Always winter, never Christmas. In other words, all the darkness and scariness that's associated with the world is there without the warmth of light and comfort. Is this not the same scenario that the world has been trying to paint for us, especially in these past 2 years? The White Witch cooked up a terrible disease, a virus, way far off in the east, and has slowly made its way in a dark and cold cloud across the earth. And it's easier for us to forget in the middle of a time that's been very serious that Christ is still Lord, that Christ still comes in the midst of darkness, in the midst of confusion, in the midst of chaos. Jesus Christ, God made man, decides to enter into our reality. And this, my brothers and sisters, is the great mystery of Christmas. God come to us. So different. Uniquely Christian. Not only do we have in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, there's a distinct interaction between God and humanity where God speaks and intervenes in our history. Very different from what you see in Eastern religions where humans are passive agents that try to climb somehow to the divine by cleaning up their karma, by living lives that lead to enlightenment. Eventually we'll, reach these these stairs to the divine. But in our prophetic tradition, God interacts to us. He speaks to us. And here in Christianity, God goes one step further and becomes one of us. Christmas is something that happens in history. If you look at the readings the church gives us in this time of Christmas, I don't always read all of them because we would have started on Christmas Eve with the genealogy of Jesus, which is very long. Have you ever tried to open up the book of Matthew and you start with the genealogy of Jesus? You'll fall asleep very quickly. But what's the whole point of all of that? The whole point of naming all of these names is to understand for us that Jesus enters into our historical reality. Jesus was a real event. It was something that actually happened. This is why in Luke's gospel that we read today, we get really weird and bizarre details like who was the governor of Syria at the time. Why? To show us the historical reality that Jesus entered into our world. See, Jesus did not come to establish doctrines, beliefs, or a moral code like other great religious leaders of the world. Not that he did not do those things, because following Jesus certainly entails believing in who he is, certainly entails in living and acting according to the way that he taught us to, and a moral code that's very at odds with what the world gives today, that's completely countercultural. But the point I'm making is that Jesus isn't just about rules. Jesus came that we might know and worship him as the living and true God. God came to present himself to us. To us. Now, it's Christmas morning. It's a Saturday morning. It's a weekend. We probably had late nights last night. Maybe some of us were opening presents this morning. Maybe some of us had to be dragged away from said presents to be here. It's, but most of us are probably here by choice this morning. Some of us might have been dragged here kicking and screaming this morning. And I'm not just talking about little ones either. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Regardless of what brings you here today, one, I'm glad to have you. Welcome. You're loved. You're accepted. You're welcome here. Two, you might be wondering, is Christmas for me? I'm not particularly religious. Is Christmas for me? And I want to tell you, yes, Christmas is for you. In fact, if you look at the Christmas story, it's not your usual religious suspects that are involved. I mean, God himself comes into the lowliest of states to show that he can relate to any of us. This is why Jesus is born among poverty and filth. We romanticize our manger scenes by making them look really pretty, and I'm glad we do. It's really quite gorgeous. But, I mean, a first century cave made into a stable in Bethlehem is not glamorous. It's not romantic. They weren't glamping. I mean, my dog's water bowl is disgusting. I can only imagine what a first century feeding trough looked like. Pretty gross. But Jesus came into that to show us that no matter what our mess is, no matter what our filth is, no matter how dirty we might feel, that Jesus still comes into our reality. So if you're wondering if Christmas is for you, Christmas is definitely for you. You might be wondering, well, I'm not very religious. I don't go to church very often. All the more reason Jesus came to invite you to show you his love. You might be saying, well, I don't get everything about Jesus. I don't get everything the church teaches. Jesus still came for you. You might say, wait a minute, Father, you don't understand this. I'm attracted to people of the same sex. Jesus is still here for you. God came for you. You might say, Father, you don't understand. I have an addiction to pornography. I have an addiction to alcohol. I'm struggling with drugs. Jesus came for you. And you might say, but Father, I'm alone. I'm scared. I'm frightened. Jesus came for you. You might say, I'm estranged from my family. And I say, Jesus came for you. And yes, for those of you that come every Sunday and are here and have life figured out, God came for you too. God came for us all. That's the beauty and the mystery of this Christmas season. I mean, remember, the angels came to tell about Jesus to shepherds. Now, obviously, there's a beautiful tradition of shepherds. Like, there's a history of David, right? The shepherd boy who became a king in Israel. In fact, Jesus is born in his city, Bethlehem. So there's a poeticness to God going to shepherds. But again, there is not much romantic about shepherds. They slept with their sheep in the fields. They didn't have a great reputation. You know, they weren't considered trustworthy people. They're often younger, inexperienced with life, didn't have families, or if they did have families, not a great relationship with them because they were out sleeping in the field with their sheep all the time, you know? I mean, this would be like Jesus appearing to the third shift at a Taco Bell. The angels appearing to a third shift at a Taco Bell to announce the incarnation of Jesus. Hey, y'all. Put your sour cream down and listen. Yeah, this is who God came to, who the angels appeared to. St. Augustine, one of my favorite saints, agrees with me, which I'm glad. It's always good when the saints agree with what I'm saying. In one of his more famous Christmas sermons, he says, "Awake, mankind, for your sake God became man. Awake, you who sleep. Rise up from the dead, and Christ will enlighten you. I tell you again, for your sake God became man." For you. For you. Jesus was placed in a feeding trough, place where animals ate, in a town called Bethlehem, which, by the way, means house of bread. Why Bethlehem? Why house of bread? Why a feeding trough? There are no coincidences with God. Now, it was called Bethlehem because it was a very fertile agrarian area, obviously, right? There were shepherds in the field. But Jesus also chooses to feed us with the very gift of himself. This is why the celebration of the Eucharist is what makes Christmas so important. You know, we talk about keeping Christ in Christmas, and we should, but also remember part of keeping Christ in Christmas is keeping Mass in Christmas. Why? Because Jesus Christ longs to give us his self, that every time we come together and celebrate Mass, every Sunday, every day, in fact, on this altar, the incarnate Jesus Christ is here in his body and blood, soul and divinity, given to us in the Eucharist, given to us. He longs to feed us with the very gift of his self in order to show us how much he loves us and allow us to be transformed every day more and more into his image as we offer him worship. So friends, as we celebrate this Eucharist this morning, I wish to give to you the same words that the angels gave to the shepherds. Do not be afraid. Don't be afraid because this world can be cold and dark and scary. Don't be afraid of the labels and judgments and stereotypes this world puts upon you. Don't be afraid because tomorrow looks uncertain. You see, Jesus Christ came not to make bad people good, but to raise dead people to life. And so I say to you, do not be afraid. For unto you a child is born. For this day to you is born a Savior who is Christ and Lord.